dream of having passive income coming into our bank accounts so that we can have more of a financial cushion and the financial freedom to either indulge a little more or simply cover our needs. However, having the necessary 20% down payment and the dreaded thought of being a landlord dealing with nightmare tenants holds many of us back from investing in real estate. There's several ways to invest in real estate without actually becoming a landlord. With me in studio is Mitch Parker, real estate wealth expert and founder of Mitch Parker Group. So Mitch, what are some of the ways that people can benefit from investing in real estate without actually being a landlord?
Sure, so there's actually quite a few different ways. And I mean, first to step back for a second, I think when everybody talks about investing in real estate, they just assume they're going to become a landlord and they're going to get a call at like 2 a.m. and there's going to be a toilet that's overflowing somewhere.
Totally.
And they're going to have to go and deal with it, right? But the reality is there's actually a lot of ways to get involved without actually having to worry about that 2 a.m. call. So, just to, fire off a few things offhand, you get things like a private mortgage, a joint venture partnership where your partner is actually doing the work and you're just sort of the cash and the mortgage guy. There's managed real estate programs out there. There's private equity. There's all sorts of them out there.
And so with all of these various options, why do you think people don't actually know about them?
I mean, I think the main thing is if you look at who's doing the advertising in the finance industry, you're getting the big banks, right? Because they have all the dollars to put into it. So, I've talked to actually people in the financial industry and they don't even know that a private mortgage is an option of something they could do.
That makes a lot of sense. Of course, they're not the ones spending the dollars. So let's start with private mortgages. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So essentially, it's the same thing as if you were to buy a house and go into a bank and get a mortgage. As you know, the regulations and restrictions have got a lot more tight in the current market right now. So the perfect client, should we say, is getting smaller and smaller in terms of the bank's criteria.
Right.
So what that's doing is it's driving a lot of people on the private side of the industry. So what they have to do is they find somebody who has, who's maybe not happy with the returns they're getting in their current investments, and they're actually able to lend money to that person. And as security, they're actually getting their name put on title of the house.
So actually, average people like you and I can be the lenders as opposed to one of the big banks in Canada.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. And it's the same process as a big bank and a person going on.
And you get the security of being on title.
That's right. And that's why when you're doing things like due diligence, the property and the analysis of it is so important to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So talk to me about one of the others, maybe joint venture partners next.
Sure. So that's kind of how I actually got into the business. My first joint venture partner was my dad.
I love it.
Yeah. So I was doing renovations construction at the time.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Dad, I have a crew of guys and some finance knowledge. You have a little bit of money and the ability to qualify for a mortgage. I was like early 20s at this point.
Right.
And he's like, okay, let's start looking for a property. And we found a rental property. And when we found the perfect property, it worked out exactly like that. He put up the money and qualified for the mortgage.
Right.
And I found tenants and managed it. And then we just became partners. And, this was a little different. It's my dad and I.
For sure.
But it could go with, two totally random strangers.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about private equity.
Sure. So private equity is typically geared for somebody who's willing to take more of a risk with their capital and who doesn't need cash flow. So if you're a lender to a mortgage, you're typically paid every month. Whereas private equity, what you're actually doing is partnering up with the developer, owning a share in that development corporation,
right.
And then you share in the profits on the back end once it's actually built.
So it's a different way to do it. And how is that different from maybe the situation where you may be working directly with the developer on a managed project?
Right, so in terms of like a managed project, so what's happening is a lot of pre-construction condos that are coming out now.
Oh, they are everywhere.
They're everywhere,
yeah.
Everywhere. And they are offering management incorporated when you purchase. So they might say, we'll lease your unit for you for the first year or 2 years, or, we're working on something right now that's a 5-year management program.
Right.
And so, on an equity scenario, you're in at the beginning before construction, helping them get across the finish line. When you're in a managed project, what you're doing is you're actually buying a unit and then getting it managed on your behalf.
Right. So what would you maybe recommend for someone who maybe doesn't want to be a landlord? You've got this variety of different strategies. How would they evaluate and decide which one may be the right one for them to start with?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. First and foremost, it's got to tie into your goals, right? Like, what are you really trying to accomplish by doing this?
Right.
And also at the same time, what is your risk tolerances? So somebody who's on the more conservative side, who really wants their name on title, they would probably look towards more of like a private mortgage, more of a managed property, whereas somebody who's willing to take a little more risk, they may be, more tempted by the private equity.
Right. And so, in all of these scenarios, obviously you're not working with the big banks, it's maybe with private developers or other individuals.
Right.
What would maybe be your tip in terms of evaluating whether or not it's a good deal for you? Obviously, it's got to align with your goals, like you just mentioned, but what would people need to look at to decide if it's a good deal for them?
So first and foremost, I think you have to look at the actual deal. So the actual development, right? So let's say, for example, it's a real estate development and they're offering a 5-year management agreement with it.
Right.
So that management agreement could be amazing, right? The actual contract could be written with all sorts of benefits to you as the owner, but if the development sucks,
doesn't help you either.
Then it doesn't help you either. So looking at the underlying asset of everything. So again, we're talking private mortgages. We're saying, look at the actual house. In these managed developments, look at the actual development. On the private equity, what is going to be built? Who's going to do it is another important thing too, right? Does the people doing it have a track record of success? Have they done this before?
So I think what to keep in mind, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that in reality you are still connected to real estate. There's still an asset, so you want to make sure that you're evaluating the strength of that.
And that's really the benefit of real estate investing in general, is you do have the asset.
There you go. Thank you so much, Mitch. Really appreciate your time
having
today.
Me.
There are many ways to invest in real estate without having to be a landlord, which allows you to make the kind of returns you've been dreaming of. Mitch and I continued this conversation with an exclusive follow-up interview where he shared the top 5 things to evaluate in a managed real estate development. You can view this interview and additional topics on our website, thefortunatefuture.com.